Evan Hale had moved across half the galaxy to avoid surprises. That was the plan, at least. He chose Station R-17 because it was quiet, stable, and known for strict rules. No smugglers, no pirates, no strange rituals in the hallway at night. Just engineers, traders, and researchers trying to live normal lives in space. For 3 peaceful months, the plan worked. Then his new neighbor knocked on his door. Evan was standing in his small kitchen, heating leftover ration stew, when he heard the sound. It was soft. Not a heavy knock, more like someone tapping carefully as if afraid the door might bite. He frowned and turned off the heater. Visitors were rare. He walked to the door and checked the panel. The display showed a resident ID from the same floor. Unit 17B. That was strange. Unit 17B had been empty until yesterday. Evan opened the door. Standing there was the smallest adult alien he had ever seen. She barely reached his chest. She had soft fur-covered ears on top of her head, a thin tail behind her, and eyes that reflected light like polished amber. Her skin was a warm, pale tone, and her hair, thick and dark, fell to her shoulders. She wore a standard station robe, slightly oversized, with a research badge clipped to the front. She looked calm, serious, and very annoyed. "You are the human from 17A, she said. Evan blinked. Yes, that's me," she nodded once as if confirming a theory. "I need milk." That was it, no greeting, no explanation, just a demand. Evan stared at her for a second, his brain catching up. "Milk? Yes," she folded her arms. "Now, if possible." Evan scratched the back of his head. He had expected many things when opening his door to an alien neighbor. Noise complaints, package confusion, maybe a translator error. Milk was not on the list. "Sure," he said slowly. "I think I have some." Her ears flicked. "You think?" "I mean, yeah, I drink it sometimes." She seemed satisfied with that answer. She stepped back half a step and waited, tail swaying slightly. Evan noticed she didn't look inside his apartment or look away. She just stood there, patient but tense, like someone waiting for a test result. Evan went back into the kitchen and opened the cooling unit. He pulled out a sealed carton of long-life cow milk, standard Earth export. He checked the date. Still good. He returned to the door and held it out. "Here you go." She stared at the carton, her eyes narrowed. "This," she said carefully, "is not milk." Evan looked down at it, then back at her. "It is, though." She took the carton from his hands, turned it slowly, and read the label. Her translator implant worked silently as her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Processed," she said. "Filtered, stabilized, heat-treated, preserved for months." "Yes," Evan said. "That's how we—" She crushed the corner of the carton slightly. Not enough to spill, but enough to show strength that did not match her size. "This is dead," she said. Evan's mouth opened, then closed. "I'm sorry," she looked up at him sharply. "You bring me dead milk." I mean it's not dead, it's just safe." Her tail snapped behind her. "Safe is not alive." She pushed the carton back into his hands and turned away. "I will obtain it elsewhere," she said stiffly. Then she walked down the hall, small footsteps echoing softly, ears angled back in irritation. Evan stood there, holding the milk carton, feeling like he had just failed an exam he didn't know he was taking. He closed the door slowly. For a long moment, he just stood in his kitchen, staring at the carton. "What just happened?" he muttered. The next morning, Evan couldn't stop thinking about it. He replayed the scene while brushing his teeth, while checking system diagnostics at work, while pretending to listen during a briefing about power flow optimization. Milk. Dead milk. He finally decided to look up his neighbor. Her name was listed in the station registry: Lyrian of Kethtal, species, Felari, profession, xenobiological nutrient systems researcher. Adult status, confirmed. That last part caught his attention. He hadn't doubted it, but the station always listed it clearly for mixed species housing. No minors, ever. He leaned back in his chair. "A food scientist," he said quietly. "Of course." At lunch he asked around. "You mean the small Felari?" another engineer said. Yeah, they're very serious about food. How serious? Evan asked. The engineer shrugged. I heard one refused an entire trade agreement because the host served reheated ceremonial broth. Evan winced. That bad? Worse, the engineer said. Food is culture to them, identity. Biology too, you probably insulted her ancestors, Evan groaned. I just gave her milk. Human milk, the engineer corrected. That's not the same thing. That evening, Evan stood in front of his cooling unit again. The carton sat on the shelf untouched. It suddenly felt like evidence of a crime. He thought about ignoring the whole thing. They were neighbors, not friends. Station life was full of awkward moments. This could just be one of them. But the way she had looked at him, more disappointed than angry, kept bothering him. He sighed, grabbed a data pad, and started researching. Fellari milk, according to the database, was not a simple liquid. It was a fresh secretion-based nutrient compound, high in enzymes that degraded quickly after separation. It was never stored, never preserved, never processed. It was consumed within hours, sometimes minutes of production. To the Fellari, freshness wasn't preference. It was biology. Evan rubbed his temples. So I gave her something that technically shouldn't exist. He kept reading. Milk for Fellari adults was often consumed during stress cycles or biological transitions. It wasn't a child thing. It was closer to medicine. That made his stomach sink. He had assumed. Again. The next day he saw her in the hallway. She was adjusting the panel outside her door, tools floating beside her. Evan slowed as he approached, unsure whether to speak. She noticed him immediately. Her ears tilted toward him. Her posture stiffened. They stopped a few steps apart. Hello, Evan said. Human, she replied, polite, cold. About yesterday. Yes. I didn't mean to offend you. I honestly didn't know. She studied his face for a long second, then turned back to her panel. Ignorance is common. Intent is what matters. I wanted to ask, he said carefully, why you needed it. I mean, if that's not rude. Her hands paused. It is not rude, she said after a moment. It is simply unexpected. She finished her adjustment and turned to face him. My species does not ask lightly, she said. Milk is not a casual thing for us. I misjudged human understanding. Evan nodded. I misjudged what you meant. Silence settled between them. I can try to do better, Evan said. If you let me. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You are not a nutrient specialist. No, he admitted. But I'm good at learning. That seemed to catch her attention. You would attempt this for a neighbor, Evan shrugged. You asked, I messed up. Feels fair to try again. Her tail moved slowly, thoughtful. Very well, she said, but understand this. If you fail again, it will not be insulting. It will simply confirm expectations. Fair enough, Evan said. She hesitated, then added, do not bring another carton. Evan almost smiled. Evan did not sleep well that night. His mind kept replaying the conversation in the hallway. The way Lyrian's ears had tilted when he said he would try. The calm warning in her voice when she told him not to bring another carton. She had not laughed at him. That somehow made it worse. He woke early and sat at his small table with a cup of coffee he barely tasted. His data pad was already open, filled with notes and diagrams. He had spent hours reading everything the station database allowed about Fellari nutrition. Most of it was locked behind academic permissions, but enough public information remained to make one thing very clear. Fellari milk was not a product. It was a process. Evan rubbed his eyes and leaned back. So how does a human even begin to fix this? At work, he made a decision that surprised even himself. During his break, instead of going to the common lounge, he requested temporary access to the auxiliary biolab. As a systems engineer, he did not belong there, but Station R encouraged cross-discipline learning. After a short approval delay, the access light turned green. The lab smelled clean and faintly metallic. Rows of equipment stood silent, waiting. Evan walked slowly, careful not to touch anything he didn't understand. He wasn't trying to recreate Ferrari biology. That would be impossible and unethical. What he needed was something else. A substitute. Ferrari milk spoiled quickly because it depended on living enzymes. Human milk processing killed those enzymes to make it safe for long storage. Two opposite systems. What if, Evan muttered, the problem isn't the source but the timing? He pulled up a simulation console and began working. He modeled enzyme decay curves. He cross-checked human-safe bacterial cultures used in fermentation. He adjusted temperature and oxygen exposure. Slowly, an idea formed, not real Ferrari milk, but a fresh nutrient suspension designed to stay biologically active for a short window. Alive but safe. It was risky, not dangerous but delicate. If it failed, it would simply break down into useless liquid. Nothing more. That evening, Evan returned to his apartment exhausted and unsure. His cooling unit hummed quietly, the carton of milk still sitting untouched. He stared at it for a moment, then pushed it aside. "This time," he said softly, "no shortcuts." The next day, Lyrian noticed changes. It started with the hallway traffic. Humans came and went more frequently near Evan's door, carrying small containers, tools, and data pads. None of them were loud, but they talked quietly, with the focused tone of people solving a problem. She pretended not to watch. Inside her apartment, Lyrian adjusted her nutrient intake manually. The station provided substitutes, but they were thin and inefficient. Her body would adapt as it always did, but adaptation came with discomfort. Humans called it stress. Ferrari called it imbalance. She had not expected the human to try. Most humans apologized loudly and forgot quickly. Evan Hale had done neither. On the third day, there was another knock at her door. She stood still for a full 5 seconds before answering. When she opened it, Evan stood there holding a small, insulated container. No labels, no bright colors, just clean metal and a careful grip. "I didn't bring a carton," he said quickly. Her ears twitched despite herself. "This is not milk," she said cautiously. "No," Evan agreed. "It's an attempt." She studied him. His posture was tense, not proud. His eyes showed fatigue, but also something else. Focus. "Explain," she said. "May I come in?" he asked. "It's easier with the equipment." After a brief pause, she stepped aside. Her apartment was neat and quiet, filled with soft lighting and curved surfaces. Evan noticed how different it felt from human spaces. Less sharp angles, more flow. He placed the container on her table and opened it carefully. Inside was a clear vessel with a faintly opaque liquid. It moved slightly on its own, reacting to air exposure. Lyrian leaned closer, her pupils narrowed. "This is active," she said slowly. "Yes," Evan replied, "for now. It won't last long, a few hours at most." She looked at him sharply. "You created a living nutrient suspension without a preservation field." "Yes," he said. "I used time instead." Silence filled the room. Finally, she asked, "Why?" Evan took a breath. "Because when you asked for milk, you weren't asking for comfort food. You were asking for balance. I gave you convenience. That was wrong." Her tail stilled. She lifted the vessel and brought it close, inhaling gently. Her expression changed, not joy, not relief, but recognition. "This is not Ferrari milk," she said. "I know," Evan said quickly. "It can't be, but it's fresh, active, and designed to interact with your enzymes, not replace them." She took a small sip, very small, her eyes closed. For a moment, Evan feared he had failed. Then her shoulders relaxed. "It is incomplete," she said softly, "but respectful." Evan exhaled without realizing he had been holding his breath. "Good," he said. "That's good." She took another sip, then set the vessel down. "You did not have to do this." "I know," Evan replied, "but I wanted to." She studied him carefully now, not as a neighbor, but as a variable. "Most species," she said, "protect themselves by refusing to change. Humans adapt instead. That is why the galaxy finds you confusing." Evan gave a tired smile. "We mess up first, then we fix things." "That is inefficient," she said. "Yeah," he admitted, but it works sometimes. She nodded slowly. Over the next few days, word spread, not loudly, not officially, but aliens talked. They noticed when a human engineer spent time in a biolab. They noticed when a Felari researcher stopped showing signs of imbalance. They noticed when Evan Hale was invited, not ordered, into a cross-species nutrition meeting. The station council requested a demonstration. Evan stood in a clean chamber surrounded by representatives of 6 species. His hands trembled slightly as he activated the display. "I'm not a food expert," he said honestly. "I'm a systems thinker. This isn't a universal solution. It's a method." He explained the idea simply. Freshness over storage, adaptation over standardization, time-limited solutions designed around biology instead of convenience. Some aliens looked skeptical, others looked thoughtful. Lyrian watched from the back of the room. When questions came, Evan answered calmly. When he didn't know, he said so. That impressed them more than confidence ever could. After the meeting, Lyrian approached him. "You embarrassed several specialists today," she said. Evan winced. "Sorry. They are not used to solutions from outside their fields," she clarified. "They will recover." "Good," he said. "I didn't mean to step on toes." She considered him. "You did, but gently." They walked back toward the residential wing together, side by side, not quite walking as equals, but closer than before. "You know," Evan said, "this all started because I didn't understand what milk meant." "Yes," Lyrian said, "and you chose to learn instead of defend yourself." They stopped outside their doors. "For what it's worth," she added, "I am no longer angry about the Carton." Evan smiled, glad to hear it. "But," she continued, "I will never forget it." "That's fair," he said. She paused, then said quietly, "If supply routes fail again, your method could save lives." Evan blinked. "I just wanted to help my neighbor." "That," Lyrian said, "is why humans are dangerous." She entered her apartment, leaving Evan standing in the hallway, realizing that something much bigger than milk had just begun. The supply disruption warning arrived 3 days later. At first, it was just a notice on the station network. A yellow-level alert. Delays in cargo arrivals due to instability along the outer trade lanes. Most residents ignored it. Warnings like that happened often and usually resolved themselves, but Lyrian did not ignore it. She stood in her apartment, reading the alert again, her ears slowly angling back. Her species depended on fresh biological inputs. Even with substitutes, long disruptions caused weakness, slower thinking, and eventually serious harm. She left her apartment and walked directly to Evan's door. Evan was already awake. He had been running system checks when the alert came through, his engineer instincts flaring. When he opened the door and saw Lyrian, he knew this was no casual visit. "You saw it," he said. "Yes," she replied. "How long?" "Best guess," Evan said. 2 weeks, maybe more if it gets worse." Her tale stilled. "That is significant." "Yeah," he said quietly. "I was hoping you'd come by." They sat at Evan's small table, data pads open, displays floating in the air between them. This time there was no awkwardness, no tension from misunderstanding, just 2 people focused on a shared problem. "The station reserves are designed for efficiency," Evan said. "Not resilience, too many species-specific needs." "Which means some will be prioritized," Lyrian said, "and others will suffer." Evan nodded. "Humans can eat almost anything. That makes us flexible, but it also means we don't always plan for fragility." She looked at him. "You are planning now." "I'm trying," he said. Over the next hours, they worked together. Evan handled system modeling and logistics. Lyrian provided biological insight, translating alien needs into parameters Evan could work with. They didn't agree on everything, but they listened. By the time the station lights dimmed to night cycle, they had a rough plan. A temporary network of fresh production nodes. Small, localized units capable of producing short-life nutrient blends tuned to different species. Nothing perfect, nothing permanent, enough to survive. The next day, Evan stood before the station council again. This time Lyrian stood beside him. "This is not a human solution," Evan said plainly. "It's a cooperative one." Some council members looked surprised by that. "The nodes require oversight," Lyrian added. "Biological input from each species. Humans provide adaptability and maintenance. Others provide knowledge." A tall, scaled counselor leaned forward. "And if this fails," Evan met their gaze, "then we adjust. Or we fail smaller instead of catastrophically." There was a long silence. Finally, the council approved a limited deployment. The station changed quickly after that. Corridors once quiet filled with movement. Engineers rerouted power. Researchers recalibrated equipment. Aliens who rarely spoke to humans now stood beside them, arguing, explaining, correcting. Evan worked until his hands ached. He barely noticed when people started calling his method the Hale framework. He noticed even less when humans began taking the least efficient rations without complaint, so others could have what they needed. Lyrian noticed everything. She watched humans eat bland nutrient paste without protest. She watched them volunteer for long shifts. She watched them ask questions without shame when they didn't understand alien biology. "This is strange," she said one evening as they adjusted a node together. "What is?" Evan asked. "Your species does not treat suffering as a competition," she said. "You reduce it wherever you find it." Evan shrugged. "We've had a lot of practice." As the days passed, the disruption worsened. Trade routes collapsed entirely. The station went into red-level rationing, and yet no one starved. The nodes worked, not perfectly, but well enough. Species that should have been incapacitated remained functional. Children, elders, and the fragile were protected first, without argument. Word spread beyond the station. Other outposts sent messages, questions, requests. Evan answered what he could, sharing designs freely. "No patents," he said, "just survive." That confused a lot of people. One night, exhausted, Evan sat alone in his apartment. The original milk carton still sat in the cooling unit, forgotten. He hadn't touched it since the day Lyrian rejected it. There was a knock at the door. Lyrian stepped inside without waiting to be asked. "You should discard that," she said, pointing at the cooling unit. Evan smiled tiredly. "Yeah, probably." She sat across from him. "The council has classified your framework as essential infrastructure." He blinked. "Already?" "Yes," she said. "You are now difficult to ignore." "That wasn't the goal," he said. "I know," she replied. "That is why it happened." She studied him for a long moment. "When my species first encountered humans, we feared your adaptability. We thought it made you unstable." "And now?" Evan asked. "Now we see it makes you reliable," she said. "You change when reality demands it." Outside, the station lights glowed steadily against the dark. Evan leaned back, exhausted but steady. "All because I didn't understand milk." Lyrian's ears tilted forward slightly. "No, because you cared enough to learn what it meant." They sat in silence, listening to the hum of a station that, against all odds, was still alive. The weeks following the trade route collapse turned the station into a hive of urgent activity. Every corridor hummed with the quiet buzz of people working, humans, Felari, and a dozen other species cooperating in ways that had once seemed impossible. The crisis had revealed weaknesses in long-standing routines, but it had also exposed strengths that no one expected. And at the center of much of it, whether he liked the attention or not, was Evan Hale. He had learned to wake before the station lights, checking data feeds, forecasting nutrient consumption, and recalibrating the production nodes. He moved among engineers and researchers with a quiet determination, answering questions, solving minor crises, and sometimes improvising solutions that seemed almost reckless. But they worked. Time and again, his human instinct to try first, fix later had saved lives, and no one could deny it. Lyrian was never far. She moved with the same quiet efficiency, her small frame and nimble movements allowing her to slip into labs and corridors unnoticed, yet she was always there when needed. Evan found himself increasingly dependent on her judgment, though he never admitted it aloud. Their conversations had grown brief, precise, and full of unspoken understanding. She no longer scolded him for mistakes. Instead, she evaluated them silently, offering suggestions only when necessary. One evening, a new problem emerged. A localized node supplying nutrient blends to the Felari sector showed signs of early enzyme decay. The output, though still technically edible, would fail within hours if not corrected. Evan arrived at the lab to find Lyrian already working on the system, her small hands adjusting dials and controls with expert precision. "It's degrading faster than expected," she said without looking up. Her tail flicked once. "I suspect contamination from air exposure during transfer. It is minor, but enough to matter." Evan nodded. "I see. We can reroute the intake to a fresh reservoir, but I'll need help monitoring the enzymatic levels until the adjustment stabilizes." She glanced at him. "You will be careful." "I will." Her ears twitched. "You must. Failure here is not an option." They worked side by side for hours, adjusting the node, recalibrating air pressure, and monitoring the delicate balance of biological activity. The process required constant attention, patience, and precise timing. Evan realized again why she had been so strict about the carton of milk. Even small errors could have consequences. In his human mind, he often underestimated these details, and it had almost cost them here. By the time the node stabilized, both were exhausted, sweat glistening on Evan's brow despite the station's controlled temperature. Lyrian leaned against the counter, tail curling around her legs, eyes soft but sharp. "You are improving," she said quietly. "Faster than I anticipated." Evan rubbed his neck. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." "No," she replied, her voice firm but not harsh. "You are doing what most would consider impossible. That is why humans are valued." He let the compliment settle for a moment. Then, without warning, alarms began to sound throughout the station. Not loud or chaotic, but urgent. Red lights pulsed, and the automated alert system announced a new update. The outer supply convoy had been attacked. Cargo loss was significant. Expected relief would now be delayed by at least 3 more weeks. Panic had not yet spread. The station's systems were prepared, but everyone knew the reality. Their reserves were strained. Human improvisation would be tested to its limits. Evan and Lyrian exchanged a glance. Words were unnecessary. They moved immediately to the central command hub. Other species were already present, some pacing, others studying screens, but all waiting for leadership. Evan cleared his throat. "We've anticipated shortages. The nodes are functioning at full capacity. Rerouting supplies and recalibrating nutrient blends will allow us to maintain critical intake levels for at least 4 weeks." A few heads turned sharply. 4 weeks, one of the counselors hissed. "We only had 2. "Yes," Evan said, "and that's under current efficiency. If we adapt consumption behavior and share resources strategically, we can extend it further. Humans can provide guidance on flexibility strategies, but all species will need to cooperate fully." Lyrian stepped forward. Her voice, calm and precise, carried authority that surprised even seasoned council members. "It is possible. This framework has been tested in simulations. It will require adjustments and continuous monitoring. Humans are the most adaptable in this situation. Use them." There was a murmur of agreement, and a few skeptical faces softened. The decision was clear. The humans would lead the operational adjustments, while specialists from other species would provide critical support. Over the next days, Evan coordinated multiple teams. He directed humans in logistical tasks, redistributing nutrient blends, creating portable nodes, and improvising storage for sensitive materials. He guided alien specialists in timing-sensitive adjustments. Lyrian moved silently among them, correcting mistakes, instructing where human intuition fell short, and translating alien biological constraints into actionable procedures. It was exhausting. His human stamina was being tested as never before, yet he found a strange satisfaction in it. This was the kind of work humans excelled at: improvisation, persistence, and adaptability. He began noticing subtle changes around him. Humans no longer argued over minor issues. Aliens, initially skeptical, began to trust his decisions, even when they contradicted their instincts. He realized that respect had been earned, not demanded, through sheer competence and commitment. One evening, while inspecting a particularly sensitive node in the Felari sector, he saw Lyrian observing quietly from the side. She did not interfere. She had stopped hovering over him constantly, trusting that he could handle the delicate adjustments on his own. That small act of confidence struck him more than any praise ever could. "You are growing dangerous," she said softly, breaking the silence. Evan frowned. "Dangerous?" "In the galaxy's eyes," she explained, "humans are unpredictable. Your species survives not by strength alone, but by ingenuity and adaptability. You challenge expectations constantly. That is what others fear and respect simultaneously." He laughed softly, wiping a smear of lubricant from his hand. "I don't feel dangerous." "You are," she replied, "because you inspire others to act, even when circumstances seem impossible." Evan considered this while finishing his inspection. For the first time, he understood the depth of what they were doing. It was not just about milk, or nutrient nodes, or even survival. Humans had become the bridge between species, the solution makers that no protocol could predict. The crisis deepened when a minor failure occurred in one of the outer nodes. A slight imbalance in enzymatic activity threatened to ruin an entire batch of nutrient suspension. Evan raced to the control terminal, coordinating with Lyrian remotely. She directed him with precision, her small voice calm over the comms. "Adjust the oxygen valves by 0.3%, she instructed. "Monitor the pH, wait 10 seconds before the next calibration." He obeyed. Sweat beaded on his forehead, heart racing, but the system responded. Within minutes, the node stabilized. Lyrian arrived shortly after, her small form moving quickly yet gracefully. "You executed perfectly," she said, eyes wide with approval. "Most humans would panic. You did not." Evan wiped his hands on his sleeve, breathing heavily. "I've had a good teacher." She tilted her head, amused. Perhaps, or perhaps humans simply learn differently. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the monitors, listening to the quiet hum of the node. Outside, the station glowed against the black void, alive with activity, movement, and determination. The weeks passed. The crisis continued, but the station survived. Resource rationing became routine. Cooperation between species strengthened. Humans became trusted problem solvers. Aliens learned that human ingenuity could compensate for the rigid protocols that had once defined their survival strategies. One night, after overseeing the final adjustments for the day, Evan returned to his apartment. He found Lyrian waiting, her small ears tilted forward. "You did not rest," she said. "I couldn't," he admitted. "Too much to coordinate, too many nodes at risk." "You have done more than expected," she replied. "The station endures because of you. And because of the humans you represent." Evan sat down heavily. "It wasn't just me. Everyone helped. I just coordinated." "Coordination is leadership," she said simply. "And leadership is rare in your species. You inspire others to follow." He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "From milk to station survival, that's quite a leap," she smiled faintly. "It began with milk. You saw value where others saw convenience. That is why you are human." Evan leaned back, exhausted but satisfied. He realized she was right. Their work had grown far beyond a simple misunderstanding, far beyond a single carton of milk. Humans had proven their adaptability, their persistence, and their ingenuity, and in doing so, they had become indispensable. Outside, the station continued its rhythm, alive with purpose. Evan and Lyrian sat quietly, two individuals from different worlds, connected by a shared goal. In that moment, both understood the truth of their partnership. When humans acted, no challenge was truly insurmountable. And that realization would echo far beyond the walls of their station, shaping the galaxy's perception of humanity for years to come. Weeks later, news from neighboring stations confirmed it. The Hale Framework, as it was unofficially called, had prevented catastrophe. Lives were saved. Species once on the brink of collapse were now stable. Human ingenuity had done more than repair systems. It had restored hope. And somewhere in the quiet corners of Station R-17, Lyrian poured herself a fresh cup of liquid nutrient. And for the first time, she appreciated the strange, unpredictable, persistent species that had started it all with a carton of milk. The crisis had stretched Station R-17 to its limits. Months of disrupted trade, constant adjustments to nutrient nodes, and near-continuous monitoring had exhausted everyone. Yet, despite fatigue, the station was alive, vibrant, and remarkably resilient. Life continued, not perfectly but far better than anyone had feared. Evan Hale walked through the central corridors, observing the bustling activity. Humans and aliens worked side by side, moving with purpose, correcting errors and improvising solutions. He saw children carrying messages between labs, scientists exchanging notes across species, and engineers testing nodes that hummed with life. Every face he passed reflected a mixture of weariness and quiet pride. The station had survived, and everyone had played a role. He stopped near one of the nutrient nodes in the Felari sector. Lyrian was there, adjusting delicate valves and observing chemical readings. Her small frame and precise movements made the operation seem effortless, though Evan knew how much concentration it demanded. "You are awake early," she said, noticing him. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Too much on my mind. Even now I keep thinking about efficiency improvements, redundancy protocols, everything." She tilted her head, her amber eyes studying him. "Humans are relentless." Evan smiled faintly. "We tend to be. It keeps us alive." She nodded, then glanced at the node. The latest nutrient mix has stabilized across all sectors. Even the most sensitive species are within acceptable biological thresholds. "That's good news," he said, relief softening his voice. "After everything, we actually made it work." "Yes," she replied, "it is working, because humans do not simply follow rules, they adapt. You adjusted when no one else could." Evan laughed quietly. "From milk to station-wide survival protocols, quite the journey." She flicked her tail, her small gesture conveying amusement. "And yet it began with a misunderstanding. A single carton." He nodded. "That carton taught me more than any manual ever could." They moved together toward the observation deck, overlooking the station's central atrium. The view was magnificent. Lights shimmered along corridors, reflecting on the polished metallic surfaces. Aliens and humans moved through their routines, unaware of the quiet satisfaction of those watching from above. The station had endured a challenge that would have broken many others. Lyrian's gaze followed the movement of personnel below. "Your species is feared in parts of the galaxy," she said softly. "Not for your strength, but for your persistence, for your unpredictability." Evan leaned on the railing, letting the moment sink in. "Fear isn't always bad. Sometimes it makes people take you seriously." "True," she said, "but respect follows even more. The station now respects humans not because they fight, but because they care enough to understand and act." He glanced at her. "You think they'll remember?" "Some will," she replied. "Some already do. Others will learn soon enough. Humans leave impressions in ways other species rarely anticipate." For a long moment they watched the station hum with life. Then Lyrian spoke again. "You changed more than systems, Evan. You changed attitudes." He shook his head, half in disbelief, half in amusement. "I just tried not to fail at milk." "That," she said, is why humans succeed. They spent the rest of the day reviewing remaining nodes, ensuring redundancy, and optimizing nutrient schedules. The work was meticulous and exhausting, yet satisfying. Evan could feel the pulse of the station through the systems, alive because of the coordinated effort of many species, but guided in part by human adaptability. By evening, the activity slowed. Lights dimmed to night cycle. Residents returned to their quarters, children played quietly in designated areas, and the hum of machinery became softer. Evan and Lyrian walked back to the residential wing together, the corridors now peaceful, yet still alive with the quiet energy of accomplishment. Evan paused at his door. The original milk carton sat on the counter, a silent reminder of how far things had come. He picked it up, turning it in his hands. "Hard to believe this started at all," he said. "It did," Lyrian replied, "but it also showed you cared enough to learn. That is the defining trait of humans." He placed the carton on the shelf. "Lesson learned, loud and clear." She tilted her head. "Do not underestimate your species. Your actions resonate farther than you realize." He smiled faintly. "I think I'm beginning to understand that." Over the next few days, the station settled into a new rhythm. Trade routes remained disrupted, but the humans' adaptability and the station-wide cooperation made it manageable. The Hale framework, though initially informal, became the cornerstone of operational strategy. Aliens who had once doubted human efficiency now recognized the value of ingenuity combined with persistence. Lyrian continued to oversee nutrient distribution and monitor critical nodes, yet she allowed humans greater autonomy. She trusted their judgment, their improvisation, and their relentless pursuit of solutions. Evan noticed subtle changes in how other species interacted with humans: more consultation, less condescension, more recognition of their unique capabilities. One evening, as Evan adjusted a nutrient node in the communal lab, Lyrian approached him quietly. "You should rest," she said. "Even humans require downtime." "I will," he replied. "Soon." Her eyes softened. "Soon should not be postponed indefinitely." "Balance is necessary for sustainability," Evan chuckled. "You sound like my mother." She flicked her tail, amused. "Perhaps. Considerate concern from a friend." He paused, realizing that the small, fierce Felari woman had become more than a neighbor. She had become a partner in survival, a collaborator whose judgment he trusted implicitly. "Partner," he echoed, smiling. "I can live with that." They spent the next hour checking systems together, reviewing data and troubleshooting minor issues. Their work was steady and efficient, yet the quiet moments in between were equally important. Words were minimal, but understanding flowed freely. No explanations were needed. They had learned to anticipate each other's needs, both in the lab and in the coordination of station operations. As night fell, Evan finally allowed himself to step away from the monitors. Lyrian followed him toward the observation deck one last time. The station lights glimmered below, steady and resilient. The work they had done together had saved countless lives, stabilized multiple species, and forged bonds that would endure far beyond the crisis. "You did well," Lyrian said softly. "Humans rarely leave such marks on the galaxy. You have done more than survive, you have inspired." Evan shook his head modestly. "I didn't do it alone. It was everyone, the team, you." She tilted her head, eyes glinting with quiet amusement. "True, yet humans have a unique way of making solutions contagious. Others follow because they cannot ignore your determination." He smiled faintly, looking out at the glowing corridors below. "I suppose that's our advantage. We try first, adjust later, and refuse to quit." "Exactly," she said. "And that is why you are feared and trusted simultaneously. Other species cannot predict you, but they learn to rely on you." Evan looked at her, his exhaustion mingled with satisfaction. "From milk to station survival, that's a long journey." "Yes," she replied. "And yet it was inevitable. Your species is persistent, that is your strength. That is why humans endure where others falter. He nodded, letting her words settle. The station hummed around them, alive with movement, cooperation, and life. Months ago, it had been vulnerable, unsteady. Now it thrived, guided by a combination of human ingenuity and cross-species collaboration. Finally, Evan allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He thought of the milk carton, of the initial misunderstanding, and of the simple curiosity and persistence that had set everything in motion. One small act, an attempt to help, had cascaded into a chain of solutions, survival strategies, and newfound respect across multiple species. Lyrian watched him silently, understanding his thoughts without needing to speak. Together, they had demonstrated the power of action guided by understanding, empathy, and determination. Humans were unpredictable, adaptable, and persistent, and in doing what others might consider trivial, they had changed the fate of an entire station. "Rest now," she said finally, breaking the quiet reverie. "The station is stable. Your work here has made a difference that will endure." Evan looked out one last time over the illuminated corridors, the soft hum of machinery filling the air. "I suppose it really has." She nodded, small and precise. "Yes, and the galaxy has noticed. Human perseverance leaves marks that others cannot ignore." Evan set aside his tools and allowed himself to breathe, finally letting exhaustion wash over him. He had learned a lesson far greater than the proper preparation of nutrient blends or the operation of production nodes. He had learned the value of persistence, adaptability, and caring enough to understand, qualities that defined his species and ensured their place in the galaxy. The station hummed steadily, alive and thriving, a testament to collaboration, ingenuity, and the unpredictable power of humanity. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant, but within the walls of Station R-17, life had endured, and it would continue to endure, for as long as humans refused to quit, adapt, and learn. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of the station, a small Felari woman poured herself a fresh serving of living nutrient liquid, glanced at Evan with a mixture of respect and quiet amusement, and allowed herself a small smile. The human had begun with a carton of milk, and he had changed everything. The galaxy would not soon forget the lesson. Humans acted, humans adapted, humans endured, and the simple persistence of one individual had proven why humanity remained a force that others could not ignore. Evan looked at her, then at the glowing station below, and for the first time he allowed himself to feel the quiet pride of a human who had started with a simple act and ended with something extraordinary.